And so it's a different standard, what is required from the research in the basic science domain that is doing physically based measurements, and the research and the standards that are required from a researcher that is doing primarily observational. And I'm not saying observational is bad, because we all do it. This is absolutely vital to any research enterprise. But when it's only based on that type of data, particularly when you're intervening in a system that is developing, it can be harmful. And as is proven already by the trauma that is caused, that some of these therapies have caused to the adults that are reporting it to us. And could this have been prevented if we had, that's a question that will haunt us forever. Could this have been prevented if we had measurements that tell you, the changes in temperature, the changes in cortisol, the changes in heart rate variability, and so forth, that child was experiencing at the moment of the intervention study, right? We don't know, right? But it's the future is that we should know. And so we should make a major correction on that, and pay attention to the type of IRB behind the study. That should be disclosed as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think you're right. For some reason, there is a misunderstanding that interventions that don't involve some like physical device or pharmacological substance don't have risk for adverse events.
Yeah.
I think that's true in the psychological literature more generally. Maybe it's worse in autism research that because many of our interventions are psychosocial and not pharmacological, that there's a much higher threshold in those fields than there are. I think and so that's the first point I made, that if your intervention can change behavior, it has potential to harm. Just because you're not giving a drug, using some sort of medical device, does not mean you don't have potential to harm.
But there is a drug involved, which is sugar.
Right. For some of these, yeah.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, that's the thing that is so subtle, that we think, oh, it's not harmful at all. But it is an intervention. It is invasive in the sense that you are ingesting something. It goes into your body. And even in an instruction that may seem very harmless could be harmful if the child's nervous system is in such a state of flight or fight that it will cause even more stress, more anxiety. And how do we know that if it's not being measured?
That's right, exactly. You're right. It has to be actively measured, not just, well, if they happen to tell us they didn't like it.
Yeah. That's a great point. And probably a good example of that is focusing on eye contact, because we know that is overwhelmingly not something that seems helpful, and many people report as harmful.
Yes. And I think the use of eye contact in non-autistic people is very misunderstood. And, a very atypical form of eye contact is promoted in interventions that try to do stuff like that.
Or touching the child, the hand over hand thing, touching the child could be very harmful to the child, sort of perception of what it's an invasion of their private space.
Autonomy. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Which again is related potentially to the long-term abuse rates,
right.
Having much higher rates of sexual and physical abuse. Again, what are the reasons for that? And why aren't more people really examining the factors that influence those types of things? I want to get to a couple of the questions. So from blogger Music Man, what do your findings about ABA research mean for the greater effectiveness of ABA as a practice? And he says, I know you can't jump too ahead of the research, but as best as you can answer. And then a follow-up, do you want me to wait for the follow-up or?
Sure. I guess just to that part, I love the framing of these questions, because I think you're right. Our study right now was not on ABA quality, but we inferred from studies, the few studies that have assessed quality. One thing I just want to parse out is that ABA is mostly examined in single case design research, not all of it. Some of it is group design research, but I make that separation because you have to look in different places to find the single case stuff. And there's different quality assessment tools for that research as compared to group design research. So I think as far as what I know, across the board, for most interventions, the quality is not high enough to know about effectiveness. I think the examples of really high quality interventions are not in the ABA field. The really high quality studies. So within Green's work and his PACT, which is a developmental intervention, that's really high quality. There's an example of a single study that has really high quality. There are not comparable examples of really high quality research in ABA. So we just don't know. What I think is alarming is that there are ABA proponents will say this is the intervention with the most accumulated evidence.
Yeah.
But there's no examination of the quality of that evidence, either the internal validity of the study or what really does this outcome variable tell us? How important is this thing that they managed to change for the child? I think both of those things have to be examined in detail. So we're actually doing a systematic review of quality now for transition age students who are transitioning out of the school system into either employment or post-secondary education. And the quality is really low. I mean, we're using these quality assessment tools and we're examining studies that don't even meet basic standards. So I think my questions are what will it take for us to be completely committed to only producing research that checks every single box on the quality indicator? If it doesn't check all the boxes, let's just not do it. I don't know what the value is of continuing to accumulate research evidence that tells us nothing.
Yeah, it just floods the field and confuses
So I think that it would be helpful in terms of ABA research if somebody were to sort through it and say, what really do we know? If we were to take quality considerations into account, what can we be certain of? I don't think it's necessarily a field that doesn't have any worth, but I would like some sorting out and stop like inflated statements that it's the only intervention in town. I don't think it should be. It should have the hold on services the way that it does, where for many autistic kids, it's the only thing they ever receive. I think that's inappropriate given what we know about the evidence.